How long does a domestic violence case take to resolve in Arizona? It's one of the most common questions I get, and unfortunately, it's also one of the hardest questions to answer. Because if you're looking for a simple answer, like 3 months, 6 months, or a year, nobody can honestly give you that answer without knowing a lot more about your case in particular. Now, before we get started, please remember that this video is for general educational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and watching this video does not create an attorney-client relationship. Every case is different, so if you're facing charges, you should consult directly with an attorney about your specific situation. So how long does a domestic violence case take in Arizona? I've seen domestic violence cases resolve in a matter of weeks, but I've also seen others that take more than a year. So instead of talking about averages, let me explain what actually determines how long a case takes to resolve. And to do that, let's walk through what usually happens after an arrest. First, it's important to understand that domestic violence is usually not a separate crime in Arizona. Domestic violence is a designation that is attached to another charge. Maybe it's assault, maybe it's disorderly conduct, criminal damage, maybe it's harassment. The timeline depends heavily on what the underlying allegation is. After the arrest or citation, the case enters the court system. For many people, that is the first frustrating part. Nothing seems to happen. Weeks go by, sometimes months go by. People start wondering whether their case was forgotten. Usually it wasn't. The lawyers are obtaining reports, they're reviewing body cam footage, they're gathering medical records, they're talking to witnesses, they're collecting evidence. And in many cases, they're still trying to figure out exactly what happened. Then comes the negotiation phase. This is where many cases are finally resolved. The prosecution makes an offer, perhaps, and then the defense will investigate and the parties will exchange information. Additional evidence may come to light, and witnesses may be interviewed. Sometimes the prosecutor changes their position after reviewing additional evidence. Sometimes the defense changes its assessment after learning more facts. This process often takes time, and frankly, it should. Most people would not want life-changing decisions being made after a 5-minute review of a police report. Another factor is whether the alleged victim wants to participate. One of the biggest misconceptions I hear is that if the alleged victim wants the charges dropped, that the case automatically goes away. And that's just not how it works. The prosecutor represents the state of Arizona, not the alleged victim. Sometimes a victim wants the case dismissed and the prosecutor continues anyway. Sometimes the victim becomes very difficult to locate, and sometimes the victim changes their account altogether. Other times, the victim becomes more cooperative than expected. All of those things can affect the timeline. Then there's the question of whether the case is a misdemeanor or a felony. Generally speaking, misdemeanor cases tend to move faster. Felony cases tend to take longer to resolve. There are usually more hearings with felony cases, more disclosure, more investigation, more legal issues to work through. And sometimes there's significantly greater consequences that are at stake. If someone is facing prison time, it often makes sense to spend additional time investigating and preparing before deciding how the case should be resolved. Another factor that surprises people is custody status. If someone is sitting in jail waiting for their case to resolve, the courts will generally have a stronger incentive to move the case forward quickly. If someone is out of custody, there may be more flexibility in scheduling. That does not mean that the case drags forever, but it can affect how quickly things move. One thing that people often don't realize is that even when the case itself isn't moving very quickly, life doesn't stop while you're waiting. In many domestic violence cases, there are release conditions in place. There may be restrictions on contact with another person. There may be restrictions on where you can go. There may be restrictions on firearm possession. You may have court dates hanging over your head. You may be wondering whether this is going to affect your job, your professional license, your immigration status, or your ability to pass a background check. That's one reason that people become so focused on the timeline. They're not really asking how long the court process takes. They're asking how long they're going to have to live with the uncertainty. And court schedules also matter. Judges have calendars, prosecutors have calendars, defense attorneys have calendars. Witnesses also have schedules, and the police officers have their own schedules. Then there are the experts, they have their schedules. So one scheduling conflict can sometimes push a hearing back weeks or even months. And if the case is heading towards trial, well, then things can take even longer. The trial doesn't simply appear on a calendar. Lawyers have to prepare witnesses, review evidence, file motions, litigate legal issues, issue subpoenas, prepare exhibits, develop trial strategy. All of that takes time. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is assuming that a faster case is automatically a better case. Sometimes additional time helps the defense. In fact, often additional time helps the defense. Witnesses can be interviewed, evidence can be gathered, counseling or treatment can be completed, negotiations can continue. In some cases, additional time allows the prosecutor to take a second look at the evidence and reach a different conclusion. That doesn't mean that the delay is for the sake of delay, but it does mean that speed is not the only goal. The goal is the best possible outcome. Now, at this point, you might be wondering whether that's good news or bad news. And the answer, as often is the case with lawyers, is it depends. Some people want the case over as quickly as possible. Others benefit from additional time. Additional time can allow for more investigation. It can allow witnesses to be located. It can allow for treatment or counseling to be completed, which will reflect favorably on the defendant. It can allow for negotiations to continue. It can create opportunities that might not exist if the case were rushed to a conclusion. So when somebody asks me how long a domestic violence case takes in Arizona, my answer is usually another question. Tell me more about the case. Is it a misdemeanor or is it a felony? Are you in custody or are you out of custody? What evidence exists? Is the case likely to resolve through negotiation, diversion, dismissal, or trial? Because those facts matter far more than any average timeline somebody found on the internet. The bottom line is this. Some Arizona domestic violence cases resolve in a few months. Some take 6 months to a year, and some take even longer than that. There is no standard timeline. The real question isn't how long domestic violence cases take. The real question is what is happening during that time and whether the case is moving in a direction that protects your future. I'm Joel Chorny. You have rights. They matter. Protect them. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.